You fly my jet? Don't make me laugh. The words sliced through the hangar like glass under tension. Evelyn Grant, billionaire, immaculate, untouchable, tossed her Hermes scarf onto the nearest seat. Her smile was all blade and perfume. "Tell you what, hero," she said, voice dipped in condescension. "Fly it, and I'll make you rich." She paused, letting the humiliation hang. Then, with a smirk sharp enough to draw blood, "No, wait. Fly it, and I'll marry you." Silence. Even the engines seemed to hold their breath. Across the glossy floor, Noah stood motionless, a mechanic in oil-stained overalls, the wrong man in the wrong place, facing the wrong kind of power, but his eyes, dark, steady, unflinching, met hers, and for one impossible heartbeat, the room tilted, because what Evelyn Grant didn't know was that this man she mocked once commanded storms she'd never dared to fly through. This is where our story begins, inside a hangar of arrogance, silence, and the single spark that would turn both their worlds upside down. The private hangar of Grant Aerospace shimmered under Los Angeles sunlight, all glass and steel, built more for power than aviation. Inside, a Falcon 900EX gleamed like a sleeping beast, polished to perfection, waiting for its next billionaire story to take flight. Evelyn Grant stood at its nose, white suit flawless, hair pinned sharp as a blade. She didn't walk so much as cut through the air. The CEO of Grant Aerospace, youngest in the company's history, and already a legend whispered about in investor circles. Today, the jet wasn't just a plane. It was a weapon in a $2.8 billion merger, and the weapon needed a pilot. Except, the pilot had just collapsed. "Food poisoning," the assistant whispered. The man lay beside the stairs, pale, sweating, useless. Evelyn's jaw tightened. The Japanese investors exchanged uneasy looks, murmuring to each other. Time was bleeding. Every second lost meant millions evaporating. That's when a voice rose from the back of the hangar. Calm, low, impossible to ignore. "I can fly it." The crowd turned. A man in oil-stained coveralls stood by a maintenance cart. Dark-skinned, tall, shoulders squared. His name tag read Noah Clark. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. For a moment she didn't speak. Then her lips curved into that practiced social media smile she used when cutting someone apart in public. "You?" She let the words stretch, silk over knives. "You fix engines, not fly them." The assistant shifted. The investor stayed silent. The only sound was the metallic hum of the cooling turbines. Noah didn't move. "You need to be in Tokyo in 90 minutes. I can get you there." Her laughter sliced through the silence. "It was beautiful and cruel. Tell you what, hero, you think you can fly my jet? Then prove it. Fly it and I'll make you rich." She laughed, sharp and cruel. "No, better, fly it. And I'll marry you." The room erupted. Nervous chuckles, sharp intakes of breath. Even her assistant smiled, because what else could you do when power decided to humiliate someone? Evelyn stepped closer. Perfume and authority surrounded her like an aura. "You've been scrubbing grease off this floor for 5 years, haven't you? And you think you can command $70 million of technology? Be serious." Noah's gaze didn't flinch. His voice stayed even. "Ma'am, I don't think I can." "I know I can." The laughter faltered. Evelyn's smile froze just long enough for a camera flash to catch the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Then it vanished. "Fine, impress us. When you fail, I'll make sure you never work in this city again." Noah nodded once. Calm. Certain. He wiped his hands on a rag, set it down carefully, and walked toward the aircraft. The hangar's air changed, so did the light. The sun caught the edges of the jet, turning its silver skin into liquid fire. Every step he took echoed like a countdown. Evelyn crossed her arms. "You've got 2 minutes before I change my mind." Noah stopped at the foot of the stairs, glanced back at her, and said quietly, "Then you'd better start timing, ma'am." The investors leaned forward. The assistant forgot to breathe. Evelyn's smirk returned, but it trembled at the edges, because for the first time that morning she wasn't entirely sure who was being tested. The hangar doors parted with a deep metallic groan. Sunlight poured across the Falcon's fuselage, catching the mirrored logo of Grant Aerospace like a challenge carved in light. Noah climbed the stairs without looking back. Every footstep sounded deliberate, steady, the rhythm of someone who'd done this before. The moment his hand touched the cabin rail, the laughter behind him dimmed, as if the air itself had changed sides. Inside the cockpit, silence lived differently. It was thicker, charged, intimate. The scent of leather, circuitry, and jet fuel mixed into something sacred. Noah slid into the captain's seat. His fingers rested on the control yoke with the ease of memory. He didn't have to think. His hands remembered. From the hangar below, Evelyn watched through the glass wall. Her smile had stiffened, but her eyes were locked on the man inside her aircraft. The assistants whispered behind her. One of them muttered, "Does he even know where to start?" She didn't answer. Then, overhead, the first low whine of power. The instrument panel came alive. Lights blinked in precise rhythm, dials rolled, the hum built like an awakening storm. The assistants stopped whispering. Evelyn's laughter returned, thinner now. "He's just guessing," she said too loud. He probably watched a tutorial online. But when the second engine spooled to life in perfect sync, her voice cracked on the last word. Noah's reflection glowed in the glass canopy, calm, focused, unreadable. He flipped 3 guarded switches, and the sound deepened, smooth as thunder over water. He spoke softly into the headset, words flowing like ritual. Battery on. Fuel pumps engaged. Hydraulic pressure nominal. Ready for taxi. The ground crew looked at each other, uncertain whether to obey. Evelyn finally raised her hand, half disbelief, half surrender. "Let him," she said. The jet began to roll. Slowly, majestically, the Falcon moved from its cradle of sunlight into open tarmac. Every vibration carried tension, the difference between arrogance and awe. Evelyn followed to the edge of the hangar, her heels silent now. The heat shimmered around the engines. The air trembled. She shielded her eyes as the jet aligned with the runway. Inside, Noah's breathing steadied. He wasn't flying for her or the investors. He was flying for himself, for every sky he'd walked away from. Throttle forward, engines roared, the Falcon surged down the runway like a released secret. At 80 knots, the wheels began to blur. At 100, gravity hesitated. At 125, the Earth finally let go. The aircraft lifted, graceful, defiant. A perfect climb. Back in the hangar, Evelyn's tablet buzzed, a notification. Live, mechanic takes the sky. One of the investors was streaming it. Thousands were already watching. She watched the tiny figure of the jet rising higher, slicing through light and distance. For the first time that morning, Evelyn Grant, queen of control, had no control left. And somewhere above the city, Noah Clark smiled to himself. "You wanted a show," he murmured. "Now watch how it ends." The Falcon banked into a golden arc over Los Angeles, sunlight washing over its wings like absolution. Down below, the hangar's silence pressed inward. The investors stared. The assistants froze. Evelyn's reflection in the glass looked pale, unfamiliar, like a woman seeing herself without armor. In that instant, one truth hung heavier than gravity. Power could buy the sky. But only skill could conquer it. And somewhere between arrogance and altitude, one of them had just begun to fall. The Falcon sliced through the pale sky, a silver blade humming against the wind. The engines roared in perfect harmony, steady, unyielding. Noah's hands rested on the controls, firm, calm, almost reverent. The light from the cockpit flickered across his face, revealing the quiet discipline of a man who had been here before, who belonged here more than anywhere else. Evelyn watched from the cabin, her posture flawless, composed, every inch the woman who owned everything she touched. Yet something in her faltered each time the jet banked. The numbers on the monitor shifted smoothly, elegantly, every command executed without hesitation. The man she had mocked minutes ago was now orchestrating the sky with effortless precision. She wanted to deny it, but the light itself betrayed her. It illuminated him, drawing lines of quiet authority across his jaw, his shoulders, the focus in his eyes. That confidence was infuriating. It wasn't arrogance. It was mastery. A mastery she hadn't expected from someone like him. Noah's voice came through the intercom, low and steady, with the calm certainty of command. Altitude 28,000 and climbing. Smooth air ahead. Just a statement, but it carried weight. A subtle reminder of who was really in control. Evelyn turned toward the window. The earth was already distant, a soft blur beneath layers of cloud. She exhaled slowly, hiding the quickening pulse behind her composed mask. Somewhere in that rising hum of the engines, a memory surfaced. Her father's voice, warm and proud, telling stories about a man who had once saved his life mid-flight. A pilot, a man named Noah. Her gaze sharpened. No, it couldn't be. But the way he moved, the precision, the restraint, it wasn't coincidence. She felt it, a quiet gravity pulling her toward an unwelcome truth. Still, she said nothing. Power was silence, and she refused to lose hers first. In the cockpit, Noah adjusted the heading, steering through a streak of dark cloud. His fingers brushed the switches like a pianist, striking familiar notes. Every motion deliberate, controlled. The fading sun painted amber light across his face, softening his expression but not the tension beneath it. There was history there, something heavy that lived behind his composure. Evelyn studied him through the open door. The balance had shifted so quietly she almost missed it. The hangar, the laughter, her careless challenge, all of it was dissolving at 30,000 feet. The silence between them grew thicker, charged, like the air before a storm breaks. Noah glanced at the instruments, then at the reflection in the glass. Their eyes met, his steady, hers uncertain. In that single glance, something passed between them. Recognition, defiance, perhaps even regret. He looked away first, not out of submission, but as if he'd already seen enough. The Falcon glided into the burnished glow of sunset. Below, the city faded into gold and shadow. Inside, two people sat separated by a few meters and an entire world of unspoken truths. Neither spoke. The rhythm of flight filled the silence, a countdown neither could hear but both could feel. Steady, inevitable. This flight was no longer about reaching a destination. It was about the moment when everything she believed would start to fall, and everything he lost would begin to rise. The storm front appeared ahead, a rolling wall of gray and silver, trembling under distant lightning. Noah's voice came again, calm, almost intimate through the headset, approaching turbulence line. Adjusting course 2 degrees north. Evelyn's hand tightened on the armrest. The clouds looked alive, breathing, but the jet didn't flinch. It cut cleanly through the edge of the storm, steady as a pulse. She stole a glance at the cockpit. He hadn't moved from his seat, hadn't looked back. His focus was absolute. For the first time since she inherited Grant Aeronautics, Evelyn Grant realized she was a passenger in more ways than one. Rain tapped the windshield in delicate bursts, a rhythm like Morse code. Noah adjusted the trim controls, each motion smooth, economical. The plane responded instantly, obedient, precise. She'd seen veteran pilots flounder in half this weather, yet this man, a mechanic from her hangar, was piloting her Falcon through a living thundercloud as if he were tracing a familiar path home. She leaned forward slightly, drawn by something she didn't want to name. There was power here, yes, but not the kind she was used to. It wasn't loud or showy. It was quiet, earned. Then she noticed it. His left wrist. A bracelet. Faded leather military issue. Her father's pilots used to wear those. Her stomach tightened. "Noah!" she called over the intercom. He didn't answer immediately. The engines filled the silence. Then, "Yes, ma'am?" Her voice steadied. "Where did you learn to fly like this?" A pause. A hint of a smile touched his tone. "Same place your father did." The words struck like a hidden chord. She blinked, suddenly unsure of what she'd just heard. The plane sliced through a pocket of clear air, sunlight breaking through the storm behind them, pouring into the cockpit like revelation. Evelyn rose, walking forward. The closer she got, the more she could see. The precision in his movements, the quiet rhythm of breath between adjustments. When she reached the door, he spoke without turning. "Seatbelt, Miss Grant. You don't want to fall when we hit crosswinds." The edge of humor in his tone disarmed her. "I'm standing," she replied, "and watching." "As you wish." Lightning flashed outside, painting the cabin in white for an instant. In that light, she saw his reflection again. Calm eyes, slight smirk, no trace of fear. Her heart beat once, hard. Then the storm was gone. Just like that. The Falcon burst through the top of the clouds into a world of gold. The sky above was clear, endless. The light below shimmered on a carpet of white clouds stretching forever. Evelyn exhaled. It felt involuntary, like surfacing from deep water. Noah reached forward, flipped 2 switches, and the engines softened to a gentle hum. "Altitude stabilized," he said, almost to himself. "Told you it would be smooth." She looked at him then, really looked. The same man she had laughed at in the hangar now sat wrapped in the quiet authority of someone who had nothing left to prove. Evelyn found her voice, low and deliberate. "You planned that, didn't you? Letting me think you couldn't." He turned his head slightly. The faintest trace of amusement curved his mouth. People see what they expect to see. Outside, sunlight fractured across the windshield, scattering into 1,000 sparks. Evelyn's reflection appeared beside his in the glass. 2 figures suspended above the world, their positions reversed, their balance forever altered. She smiled, barely. "You just changed the weather," she said. Noah's reply came soft, almost a whisper. "No, ma'am. Just the forecast," the radio crackled. Air traffic control cleared them toward their destination. He acknowledged the call with professional ease. His tone crisp and commanding, and for the first time in her life, Evelyn Grant, CEO, heiress, woman who never relinquished control, felt something unfamiliar. Admiration. She sat back, the clouds falling away beneath them. The game she had started in mockery had turned into something else entirely. She wasn't sure what unnerved her more, his skill or the realization that up here in this thin golden air, she wasn't the one holding the power anymore. The Falcon touched down with a whisper. The landing was flawless, so smooth that Evelyn almost missed the moment the wheels kissed the runway. Outside, rain shimmered across the tarmac in silver streaks. Inside, silence hung, dense as fog. Noah's voice came over the intercom, quiet but resolute. "Touchdown confirmed. Taxiing to private terminal." Evelyn straightened her jacket, the gesture automatic, but her hands betrayed her with a faint tremor. She hated that. She had spent a lifetime mastering stillness, projecting command, but now every breath seemed borrowed from the man at the controls. The jet slowed, turned, and came to rest beside the hangar, her hangar. The one that bore her name in stainless steel letters, Grant Aeronautics. It had never looked smaller. Noah powered down the engines. Each switch clicked with deliberate finality. Then, for a long moment, he didn't move. His hands rested on the throttles, motionless, as if he were letting go of more than just machinery. Evelyn unbuckled her seatbelt. "You can come out now," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. He emerged from the cockpit, tall, silent, framed by the fading sunlight spilling through the windows. His uniform was still the grease-stained coverall of a mechanic, yet something in his posture made it look like a captain's attire. The difference was invisible, but absolute. The door opened. Waiting on the tarmac were 3 investors and a few staff members, faces filled with confusion. They'd seen the live stream. They'd seen him fly. Evelyn felt their eyes shifting between her and Noah, measuring the unspoken reversal neither of them could yet name. One of the investors, an older man with a clipped accent, broke the silence. "Miss Grant, that was unexpected." Evelyn turned her gaze toward Noah. His expression remained calm, unreadable. For a fleeting moment, she thought she saw the echo of her father's smile in his eyes. "He's not a pilot on record," another investor said. "Who exactly is this man?" Noah met their stares evenly. "Maintenance, sir. Hangar Bay C." The statement hung in the air like a riddle that refused to explain itself. Evelyn saw the discomfort ripple through the group, the realization that a man they'd dismissed had just saved their meeting, their company, their image. The silence stretched until she finally spoke. "Mr. Carter," she said, her tone sharp but controlled. What you just witnessed was competence, something I value above appearances. A few heads turned. She knew they expected her to reassert dominance, to turn the moment back in her favor. But she didn't. She couldn't. Not yet. Noah gave a small nod, as if acknowledging her effort to bridge the impossible gap between them. Then he began walking toward the open hatch, ready to disembark. "Wait!" she called. He stopped but didn't turn. Evelyn took a step closer. Her voice dropped low, private. "What you did up there, why didn't you tell anyone you could fly?" He looked back finally. His eyes held the same calm as the sky above them after a storm. "You never asked." Her breath caught, just that. Simple, devastating. Outside, the storm clouds parted, revealing streaks of soft gold light spilling across the wet tarmac. Reporters were already gathering near the security line. The air buzzed with the faint static of something irreversible. Noah descended the stairs, the crowd parting unconsciously as he passed. Cameras turned. Whispers spread. Evelyn followed, each step heavy with the weight of realization. This moment would not fade quietly. At the bottom, he paused, looking toward the hangar's towering letters once more. Then he turned to her, voice calm, almost reflective. "You should be proud. Ms. Grant, your company builds excellent machines." She blinked, caught off guard by the sincerity. "But sometimes," he added, "it forgets the people who keep them in the air." And then he walked away. No defiance, no anger, just quiet certainty. The kind that left echoes long after the sound was gone. Evelyn watched him disappear into the evening light, surrounded by murmurs, lenses, and questions she wasn't ready to answer. For the first time in her career, she had nothing to say. The world had just seen her empire shift on its axis, and the man who caused it was walking away without looking back once. The storm had passed, but the air around the hangar still felt charged, heavy with something electric. Outside, cameras flashed in the mist like tiny bursts of lightning. Inside, the hush of disbelief lingered. Noah had vanished into the night. One minute, he'd been standing on the tarmac, the next, gone, swallowed by rain and shadow. Evelyn stood at the foot of the jet's stairs, frozen in the glow of floodlights that painted her in gold and scrutiny. "Ms. Grant! Did he really fly it? Was that your employee?" The questions came like shrapnel, each one sharper than the last. She said nothing, only raised a hand to shield her face from the cameras. The flashbulbs caught her eyes, sharp, unreadable, and for the first time, she didn't know whether the world saw authority or guilt. By midnight, the video had already spread. A mechanic flying a CEO's private jet through a storm. The footage, captured by an investor's phone, showed the entire scene, the challenge, her laughter, his quiet defiance, and then the impossible flight. On social media, the story exploded. The janitor who outsmarted a billionaire. Power takes flight. The man who made the sky his revenge. Millions of views, endless commentary. In the penthouse suite overlooking the Miami skyline, Evelyn sat before the television, her reflection blending with the news anchor's voice. Sources confirm the unidentified pilot is a Grant aeronautics mechanic known only as Noah Carter. Records indicate he holds multiple flight certifications, though the company has yet to issue a statement. She muted the screen. The room went silent except for the hum of the city below. On the table lay the flight report. His signature at the bottom, neat, unhurried. She traced a finger over it. He had signed his name like a man who knew exactly who he was. The intercom buzzed. Her assistant's voice trembled through the speaker. "Ms. Grant, the board wants an emergency call in the morning. They're asking about liability, about optics. Tell them to wait. But ma'am, the investors—" "Wait." The word cut through the air, calm and final. She ended the call and leaned back, staring out into the night. For the first time, she replayed his words in her mind. "You never asked." Something inside her shifted, small but undeniable. Not regret, not yet. Something more dangerous. Curiosity. She opened her laptop. A search bar waited, blank and patient. Her fingers hesitated over the keys before typing, Noah Carter, flight record, military registry. The page loaded slowly, as if the system itself were reluctant to reveal him. Then lines of text appeared, decorated veteran, combat rescue pilot, commendations for precision under fire, discharged after an accident classified as non-fault mechanical failure. Evelyn's breath caught. The file included a photo, his eyes the same, calm and steady, but younger, brighter. Her father's name appeared twice in the report. General Evelyn Grant, commanding officer. The connection hit like a quiet explosion. The man she had mocked was once her father's protege. Outside the glass wall, lightning flickered far off the coast. She rose slowly, the realization settling like dust in sunlight. This wasn't humiliation. It was inheritance, unfinished, unexpected, and staring back at her. Her phone buzzed again. Another notification. The video had crossed 20 million views. Headlines scrolled across the screen. Corporate arrogance meets working-class genius. Her own image appeared beside his. Frozen mid-laugh, mid-challenge. Her empire, her name, her power, suddenly felt fragile. And yet, beneath the sting of exposure, a strange calm spread through her. The kind that precedes clarity, she whispered to the empty room, almost to herself. So that's who you are, Noah Carter. The rain had stopped completely now. The city lights below shimmered in reflection. 1,000 tiny mirrors staring up. Tomorrow, the world would demand answers. But tonight, for the first time, Evelyn Grant wasn't planning her defense. She was planning her next move. The boardroom felt colder than usual. Morning sunlight filtered through the glass walls, slicing across polished wood and uneasy faces. Every executive in the room had the same look, a mixture of fear, confusion, and the unmistakable scent of self-preservation. At the head of the table sat Evelyn Grant, immaculate as ever. Her suit was black, her expression carved from ice. The only sound came from the steady tick of the clock and the faint hum of the muted news broadcast on the wall. The viral video continues to dominate global headlines. Noah Carter, a Grant aeronautics mechanic, stunned the world after piloting a Falcon 9X through a storm with CEO Evelyn Grant on board. She pressed the remote, cutting the sound. Silence fell again, heavy as glass. Richard Haynes, the company's CFO, cleared his throat. Evelyn, we're hemorrhaging investors. The stock dropped 8% overnight. Everyone wants a statement or a scapegoat. Find another word, she said quietly. We're not hunting anyone. The head of PR, a woman with perfect posture and eyes that never stopped calculating, leaned forward. With respect, Ms. Grant, the narrative is already out of our control. The footage shows you mocking him, laughing. We can't spin that. The best we can do now is— Evelyn looked up sharply. Tell the truth? The PR chief hesitated. Contain the damage. A murmur rippled through the room. Evelyn rose, crossing to the window. The city sprawled below, vast and indifferent. For years she'd ruled this skyline. Now it stared back at her like a witness. Behind her, the debate resumed. Words like liability, diversity optics, and corporate apology bouncing against glass walls. Evelyn tuned them out. Her focus stayed on the reflection, the blurred image of herself beside the skyline, like a ghost occupying her own place. Finally, she turned. What about him? The room stilled. Carter, she said. Where is he? We don't know, Richard admitted. He hasn't returned to work. His address on file is outdated. Reporters are swarming his old neighborhood, so he disappeared. Yes, ma'am. Evelyn nodded slowly. Good for him. A few heads turned, startled by the tone. Quiet admiration where they'd expected resentment. She noticed, but didn't explain. Instead, she walked back to her chair and placed both hands on the table. Here's what we'll do. No denials. No press conference, not yet. Let them talk! Let them talk! Richard blinked. Evelyn, with respect, they're tearing us apart out there. She leaned forward. Exactly. Let them finish. Then we'll show them what comes after. The board exchanged uneasy glances. They'd seen her ruthless before, cold, calculated, decisive. But this was different. There was something in her voice now, an undercurrent of control that didn't sound defensive. It sounded strategic. The PR chief finally asked, "And what happens after?" Evelyn allowed herself a small, deliberate smile. "We find him, and we listen." A soft chime interrupted her, a phone alert on the big screen. A new video had gone live. The same headline repeated, but the thumbnail was different. A news anchor interviewing Noah Carter. The room froze. He was sitting in a modest living room, wearing a plain shirt. No theatrics, no defiance. Just calm. The interviewer asked, "Do you think she meant to humiliate you?" Noah paused before answering. "I think she meant to test me. Maybe herself. People in power do that. The sky just had other plans." The room stayed silent long after the clip ended. Evelyn looked at the frozen image on the screen. His steady gaze, his unflinching calm. And something flickered behind her composed expression. Admiration. Regret. Recognition. She straightened. "Cancel the damage control plan," she said. "This story isn't about damage anymore." "What is it about then?" Richard asked. Evelyn's eyes never left the screen. Revelation. Outside, the city gleamed under morning light, bright, merciless, and waiting. The address was buried in a forgotten district on the edge of the city, where the skyscrapers dissolved into old warehouses and cracked asphalt. The kind of place that existed between maps, half remembered, half ignored. Evelyn's car stopped at the end of a narrow street lined with faded murals and rusted chain-link fences. The rain had just ended, leaving the air heavy and clean. She stepped out, her heels echoing against puddles that mirrored the evening sky. The building matched the record, a converted maintenance hangar from the 1960s, its walls still carrying the ghost of flight paths and fuel stains. A single light glowed inside. She hesitated at the door, unsure if she should knock or turn away. But curiosity had long since crossed into something more stubborn, the need to understand. The door opened before she could touch it. Noah stood there, framed by the amber light spilling from the workshop behind him. He wasn't surprised to see her. Maybe he'd been expecting this. "Ms. Grant," he said simply. Her voice caught on the edge of formality. "You disappeared." I wasn't hiding. His tone wasn't defensive, just factual. He stepped aside, motioning for her to enter. The space inside was spare but alive. Tools hung with military precision. On a long table, a model aircraft lay half-assembled, its wings marked with faint sketches of aerodynamic calculations. On one wall, a photograph. Her father shaking hands with a younger man in uniform, Noah. Evelyn stopped in front of it, the air suddenly too still. "You flew with him." Noah's eyes softened. "Once. He gave me my first real command. He never mentioned you." He smiled faintly. "He wouldn't. Your father believed lessons mattered more than names." She turned to face him, searching his expression. "And what lesson was I supposed to learn?" "That altitude doesn't change perspective," he said quietly. "Only clarity does." Evelyn's composure wavered. "You made me look like a fool." "No," he replied, meeting her gaze. "You made yourself look human." For a moment, silence filled the space. Not hostile, not forgiving, just real. She looked around again, absorbing the scent of oil and metal, the subtle hum of an old radio somewhere in the back. You could be anywhere right now. Every network wants you. Every company wants your name. Why stay here? "I don't need to be anywhere else," he said. "The sky doesn't care about headlines." Evelyn studied him. "You're not angry. Should I be?" "You were humiliated in front of the world." His eyes held steady. "No, Ms. Grant, I was seen. There's a difference." Her breath faltered. He continued, gentler now. "For 5 years I fixed the machines your people flew without ever asking who kept them alive. You didn't ask either. That's not cruelty. It's blindness. We all have it." Evelyn stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You think I can undo that?" "No," he said. "But you can stop repeating it." The rain started again, soft against the roof. The room smelled of storm and steel. Evelyn exhaled slowly, feeling the weight in her chest shift, not vanish, but move. She nodded once. Come back to the company. Noah looked at her, unreadable. Why? Because I need someone who tells me when I'm blind. The faintest trace of a smile touched his lips. And what makes you think I'd say yes? Because, she said, stepping into the light. You're not done teaching me yet. Outside, thunder rumbled somewhere far off. Not a warning, but a promise. The elevator doors slid open to the top floor of Grant Aeronautics. Noah stepped out, his reflection stretching across the polished glass walls. The air carried that unmistakable scent of money and machinery, ozone, coffee, and ambition. He hadn't smelled it in months, but it hit him like déjà vu. People stopped talking the moment they saw him. Conversations collapsed mid-sentence. A few eyes dropped. A few lingered, curious, uncertain. Some afraid. The last time he stood in this building, he'd been invisible. Now, invisibility was no longer an option. Evelyn walked beside him, expression composed, every step deliberate. The board had insisted on a formal reintroduction, though the headlines had already done it for them. The mechanic who rewrote the sky, from hangar to hero, Noah, Carter's second flight, each. Headline had turned him into a symbol, and symbols made people nervous. When they reached the conference room, the chatter outside fell completely silent. Inside, the senior team was waiting, a dozen executives, each dressed in tailored restraint. The atmosphere felt less like a welcome and more like a trial. Evelyn broke the silence. You all know why we're here. Mr. Carter has agreed to return to Grant Aeronautics as a consultant for our new flight operations and training division. The CFO spoke first, voice tight. With all due respect, Ms. Grant, bringing him back invites risk. The media's still circling. We don't control the narrative anymore. Evelyn's tone was sharp enough to cut through the room. That's because we never did. She looked at Noah. Go ahead, he nodded, stepping forward. The movement was unhurried, grounded. He didn't carry notes or slides, just his voice. I spent 5 years fixing your aircraft, he began. Engines, landing gear, avionics. I knew every wire in those jets better than the people who flew them. He let the words settle, not rushing. Some of you saw me every day and never once wondered if I knew how to fly. That's not your fault alone. It's how the system works. People like me are meant to stay in the background. A murmur ran through the room, but he continued. I'm not here to embarrass anyone. I'm here because the system that built your success is the same one that almost broke mine. If you want to rebuild this company, start by asking who's standing in your shadow. The silence that followed was different now. Not discomfort, but reflection. Evelyn watched him carefully. The authority she'd always worn so easily now felt shared, like a light refracted through glass. After a long pause, the head of engineering spoke. You're saying we should open the ranks? Noah met his gaze. You should start seeing the people who are already here. It wasn't a speech meant to impress. It was a mirror held up, steady and merciless. Evelyn finally broke the silence. Effective immediately, she said. Noah will oversee a new initiative, an internal academy for underrepresented aviation workers. Pilots, mechanics, controllers, engineers. We'll name it the Elevation Program. A few jaws tightened. A few eyes softened. Change always began this way, slow, uncomfortable, irreversible. Noah didn't smile. He simply nodded, his expression unreadable. But somewhere in that stillness was the faintest flicker of peace. Not triumph, not revenge, just balance restored. As the meeting adjourned, Evelyn lingered near the window. Below them, the city gleamed under a sharp blue sky. She turned to him. You realize what you just did? Noah looked out at the skyline, voice low, gave the storm a reason to clear. For the first time since the scandal began, Evelyn smiled, small, real, human. Outside, a new banner was already being raised across the hangar. Grant Aeronautics, the Elevation Initiative. The same place that once humiliated a man now bore the mark of his return. And for the first time in years, both of them felt like they were finally, truly, flying again. By noon, the hangar was no longer quiet. Camera crews, journalists, and staff from every division of Grant Aeronautics crowded near the runway. The banner for the Elevation Initiative rippled in the coastal wind, bold letters against a pale sky. Beneath it, rows of mechanics, technicians, and flight attendants stood shoulder to shoulder. For years, they had worked in separate worlds, different uniforms, different rooms, same silence. Now, the silence was breaking. Evelyn stepped onto the small stage erected beside the hangar doors. She wasn't used to speaking outdoors. The air carried her voice farther than the polished walls of boardrooms ever had. Behind her stood Noah, quiet, still, eyes lowered to the tarmac as if listening for ghosts. Cameras clicked. She began. 5 years ago, a man walked through these hangars invisible to us. Not because he lacked talent, but because we refused to see it. A ripple of movement spread through the crowd. Mechanics exchanged glances. Pilots shifted uneasily. I was part of that blindness, Evelyn continued, and the truth is it nearly cost us everything. But storms, even the worst of them, have a way of clearing the air. Her gaze found Noah's for half a second. Today we begin again. Applause rose, hesitant at first, then steady, rolling through the hangar like distant thunder. When she stepped back, Noah took her place at the microphone. The murmurs quieted. He looked over the crowd, face unreadable. The same people who had once looked through him now waited for him to speak. I don't have a speech, he said simply. Just a memory. He paused, letting the weight of the air settle. 5 years ago, I used to mop this floor at night. I'd stop sometimes to watch the jets, wondering what it would feel like to fly again. Not just the machines, the freedom. A faint breeze tugged at his sleeve. He smiled slightly. I used to think flying was about altitude, but it's not. It's about trust, the kind that keeps the wings steady when the sky isn't kind. He looked at the crowd again. If you ever want to know what kind of company you work for, don't look at the jets. Look at who cleans them. The hangar fell utterly silent. Evelyn's throat tightened. She'd rehearsed control her entire life, but something in those words, simple, grounded, merciless, cracked through her armor. Then someone started clapping. A single sound that grew and spread until the hangar vibrated with it. Mechanics, engineers, pilots, all of them. Even the ones who had laughed at him once. And in that applause, something unspoken shifted. Not forgiveness, recognition. Later that evening, social media caught the footage. The clip of Noah speaking beside the woman who once mocked him traveled faster than the scandal ever had. From humiliation to hope. One headline read, Grant Aeronautics turns its storm into a runway, but inside the hangar, none of that mattered. Evelyn stood at the edge of the crowd, watching as Noah was surrounded by employees, not fans, not worshippers, just people who finally saw him. He didn't bask in it. He just listened, nodded, and smiled when they spoke. It was the smile of someone who had nothing left to prove. When the sun dipped below the horizon, he turned toward her. You did it, she said softly. He shook his head. No, we did. The light faded behind them, leaving the hangar bathed in the amber glow of its new sign. Excellence has no uniform. And as the last plane of the day lifted into the dusk, its contrail glowed gold against the sky, the same color as redemption. The applause had long died away, but it still echoed somewhere inside him. Noah sat alone in his apartment overlooking Biscayne Bay, the window open to the night breeze. The city hummed below, horns, waves, laughter, but he heard only the faint roar of engines that weren't there. On the coffee table, a dozen newspapers lay scattered. His name was everywhere. The pilot who made the world look twice. Noah Carter. From shadows to sky. He turned one over, face down, as if the headlines were too bright to look at. The phone vibrated. Messages, interviews, invitations. He ignored them all. The glow from the screen cast pale light across his hands. The same hands that had steadied a jet through lightning. The same ones that once scrubbed grease from a hangar floor. He flexed them absently. They didn't feel like his anymore. Outside, a storm was forming again, smaller, distant, harmless. Still, he found himself watching it. The sky had always been his measure for peace, yet tonight even that looked uncertain. He closed his eyes and saw it again. The cockpit, the flashing lights, the sound of Evelyn's voice over the intercom. And behind it, something older. The mountain ranges of Afghanistan, the screaming rotors. The sudden silence that followed. His pulse quickened. He opened his eyes. The apartment snapped back into view. The storm outside cracked with light. He exhaled slowly, counting the rhythm like he used to in training. Inhale, hold, release. The tremor faded, but the memory didn't. It never did. The world called him a hero, but heroes slept badly. He rose, crossing to the shelf where a small photo sat tucked between forgotten books. A man in uniform, his old commander, shaking his hand after a rescue mission years ago. The caption underneath, "Courage is quiet until it speaks." Noah traced the edge of the frame. "You'd hate what they're calling me," he murmured. The knock at the door was soft, almost hesitant. He frowned, crossing the room. When he opened it, Evelyn stood there, raincoat damp, hair pulled back, eyes searching. "Late hour for a CEO," he said. "Late hour for anyone who can't sleep," she replied. He stepped aside. She entered, the faint scent of rain and jet fuel trailing behind her. The apartment was sparse, clean, ordered, untouched by the chaos of fame outside. She looked around, taking it in. "You've been ignoring everyone," she said. He poured her a glass of water, handed it to her. "You came to check if I'm alive?" "No," she said softly. "To see if you still are?" The difference in her tone caught him off guard. She set the glass down, meeting his eyes. "You're everywhere, Noah. People are building stories around you. Movements, programs, headlines. And I keep wondering if you even want any of it." He sat opposite her, elbows on his knees. "Do you?" "I want what's real." He studied her face, the exhaustion, the vulnerability threaded through command. "Real doesn't trend," he said. "No," she admitted. "But it lasts." The rain deepened outside, streaking the glass with silver lines. They sat in silence, listening to it. Finally, Evelyn asked, "Do you regret it? That day?" He looked toward the storm. "No, I just wish the sky hadn't turned me into something I'm not." She understood. "Then tell them who you are." He smiled faintly. "They don't want the man. They want the myth." "Then give them both," she said, standing. "The world needs stories. Just make sure you're the one writing yours." When she left, he returned to the window. The storm had moved offshore, its lightning soft against the horizon. For the first time that night, he felt the weight of his own story, not as burden, but as responsibility. He whispered to the dark water below, "Then maybe it's time to start again." And as the thunder rolled, Noah Carter began to believe he could. The first morning of the program broke clear and bright. The hangar that once echoed with whispers of scandal now carried the hum of anticipation. Rows of folding chairs lined the polished floor, and a white banner stretched across the rafters. The Elevation Initiative, inaugural session. Noah arrived early. The air still smelled faintly of paint and jet fuel, two scents that, for him, always meant possibility. Sunlight filtered through the skylights, falling across the simulators that had been rebuilt in the far corner. He walked slowly between the rows of empty seats, fingertips grazing the metal backs, grounding himself. The stillness reminded him of pre-flight calm, that sacred pause before motion. The door opened behind him. Voices filled the space. The first group of recruits stepped in, 10 men and women in maintenance overalls, flight school uniforms, and service jackets. Some young, some older, some confident, others hesitant, all of them uncertain what they were walking into. Noah turned, offering a simple nod. "Welcome." The word carried farther than he expected. They took their seats. He could feel their eyes on him, curiosity, skepticism, hope. The headlines had reached them too. The legend of the mechanic who flew through a storm had become something more than rumor. But legends didn't teach. People did. He waited for the noise to settle before speaking. "Some of you came here because you want to fly. Some because you were told you couldn't. A few glances traded across the room. I know both kinds, he continued. I've been both kinds. He moved toward the whiteboard, drawing a simple line, a curve that dipped, rose, and leveled out. This is flight, he said. Lift and drag. Ascent and descent. You climb, you fall, you stabilize. The same is true here. You'll fail. You'll get frustrated. You'll think someone's holding you down. He paused, tapping the board. Maybe they are. But gravity's part of the job. What matters is what you do with it. Silence. Not awkward, but focused. He could see it now, the shift in posture, the spark of belief fighting through doubt. The kind of moment that never made headlines but built futures quietly. At the back of the hangar, Evelyn watched from the mezzanine window. She hadn't told him she would come. She didn't need to. The sight of him, calm, commanding, entirely in his element, was enough. For months, she had lived under lights and cameras. Now this, the quiet work of rebuilding, felt like the real victory. Down below, a young woman raised her hand. "Mr. Carter?" she asked. "What made you start this?" He thought for a moment. Then he smiled. "Because once someone forgot to ask what I could do," he said. "And I don't want that to happen to anyone else." A low murmur of understanding rippled through the group. He stepped back, letting the words hang there. "All right," he said. "Let's begin." The class rose, gathering near the simulators. Their voices filled the hangar, bright, alive, unguarded. The kind of sound that made the walls seem wider, the air lighter. From the mezzanine, Evelyn turned and walked away quietly. There was nothing left to prove, not for either of them. Down below, Noah placed his hands on the console of the first simulator. The screens glowed to life, bathing his face in soft blue light. Outside, the sky was clear. He looked toward it through the glass, a small, private smile breaking through the calm. No storm, no spotlight, no noise, just the sky, and the promise of flight shared. 2 years later, the sky above Miami was alive again. At Grant Aeronautics' newly christened McCall Institute for Flight and Innovation, students in silver uniforms moved between aircraft simulators, their laughter echoing off the hangar walls. The once muted space now shimmered with motion, like an engine rediscovering its rhythm. In the center of it all stood Noah. He was older now, not visibly, but in presence. The edges of his voice had softened, his movements slower, deliberate, confident. He no longer carried the storm inside him, but traces of it lingered in his gaze, like distant lightning that refused to fade. He watched as a young pilot completed a flawless virtual landing. The simulator lights dimmed, and the class erupted into applause. Noah smiled, not because of the performance, but because of what it represented. Calm under pressure, mastery born of persistence. Evelyn entered quietly, as she often did. No entourage, no cameras. Just a folder in her hand and that same sharp composure that had once been armor but now felt like discipline. "You still come to every session," he said, without looking up. She stopped beside him. "Habit or hope? Which wins today?" "Ask me when I stop holding my breath," she replied, half smiling. They stood in companionable silence as the students filed out. When the last door closed, she placed the folder on the console before him. "What's this?" He opened it. Inside was a sealed envelope with the emblem of the International Aeronautics Council embossed in gold. "Read it," she said. The letterhead gleamed beneath the fluorescent lights. "Captain Noah Carter, in recognition of your contributions to aviation education and diversity in aerospace development, the Council extends an official invitation to pilot the inaugural flight of the Aurora X prototype, the first hybrid transcontinental jet of its kind. The flight will symbolize a new era in aviation and will be broadcast globally as part of the Sky Renaissance program." Noah stared at it. "They want me to fly again?" Evelyn nodded. "They want the world to see who you've become." He closed the folder. "I'm not sure I'm that man anymore." "Maybe not," she said softly. "But the sky hasn't forgotten you." He turned toward the hangar window. Outside, an Aurora prototype waited on the tarmac, its metallic skin reflecting the sun like liquid light. It was smaller than the corporate jets he'd once flown, but more graceful, less machine, more promise. The silence stretched between them until Evelyn broke it. "You don't have to say yes. The Institute doesn't need another myth," he smiled faintly. "But maybe the sky does." That night he stayed in the hangar long after everyone left. The lights dimmed, leaving the aircraft bathed in half-shadow. He walked around it slowly, trailing his hand along the smooth fuselage. The metal was cool beneath his fingers, alive somehow. Memories flickered, thunder over Georgia. Fire over mountains, the sound of his name shouted across radios, the hum of engines that had once been both salvation and curse. He stopped at the nose of the jet, staring into its reflection, a man divided between earth and air. Then quietly, he whispered, "All right." "One more flight, in the glass." His reflection smiled back, older, steadier, free. The morning of the flight came dressed in gold. The runway stretched endlessly beneath the dawn, its lights still blinking against the last traces of night. The Aurora X gleamed on the tarmac like a living thing, wings curved in perfect symmetry, engines whispering with restrained power. News crews lined the perimeter fences. The world was watching. Inside the private terminal, Noah stood before the mirror in his flight suit. The patches on his sleeve, McCall Institute and Aurora X Mission 1, caught the light as he moved. He adjusted his collar once, twice, then stopped. For the first time in years, he saw not the mechanic, not the myth, but the man who had learned to live between the two. Evelyn entered without knocking. She carried his helmet under one arm. "They're ready for you." He met her eyes through the mirror. "Are you?" She hesitated. "Does anyone ever get ready for history?" He smiled, small, unguarded. "Guess we'll find out." As they walked down the corridor, the distant hum of generators vibrated through the floor. Through the glass walls, the aircraft loomed larger, waiting. "You know," Evelyn said, voice low, "you don't owe this to anyone." "I know." "Then why do it?" He stopped just short of the hangar doors. "Because the sky gave me back my life. Maybe I owe it something after all." The doors opened, flooding the hallway with sunlight. A wave of sound greeted them. Cheers, cameras, applause. But to Noah, it all fell away, replaced by the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. He climbed the stairway to the cockpit slowly, each step deliberate. The smell of fresh metal and synthetic fuel filled his lungs. It was familiar, grounding. Inside, the cockpit glowed with a soft blue luminescence. Digital displays flickered awake, waiting for command. He ran his hands over the controls, every switch, every lever, as if reacquainting himself with an old friend. His fingers paused on the throttle. Outside, Evelyn watched from the observation deck, headset pressed to her ear. "Tower confirms all systems nominal," she said into the mic. "Clear for taxi when ready." Noah's voice came through steady, calm. "Copy that. Aurora X rolling." The jet began to move. It rolled forward with the quiet grace of inevitability, sunlight glinting across its silver skin. The world held its breath. At the far end of the runway, Noah paused, the engines purring beneath him like restrained thunder. "McCall Tower," he said. "This is Aurora X. Ready for takeoff. Copy Aurora X. Winds calm. Cleared for departure. Godspeed." He closed his eyes, just for a moment. In that silence, ghosts gathered. Rocket's voice from the mountains. His daughter's laughter. The echo of every voice that had doubted him. All of it blurred into one truth. He was still here. He opened his eyes. Throttle to full. The jet surged forward, pressing him into the seat. The roar built like a heartbeat amplified, power meeting purpose. Evelyn watched from the tower as the Aurora X lifted clean from the runway, slicing through the morning light like a silver blade. "Altitude 5,000 and climbing," the radio crackled. Then, over the static, his voice. "Evelyn, tell them one thing." "What's that?" "That I wasn't flying to prove I could. I was flying because I finally wanted to." Static filled the line. Then only the sound of ascent. The world below erupted, Applause, cameras, tears, but none of it mattered. Above the clouds, Noah smiled. The horizon stretched endlessly ahead, and for the first time in a lifetime, it felt like peace. When the Aurora X descended through the final layer of cloud, the sky turned to fire, gold spilling into crimson, light melting into memory. Noah guided the jet through the glide path with hands that no longer trembled. The world below, runway, tower, waiting faces, shimmered through the haze like something remembered rather than seen. "McCall Tower," he said, voice low and steady. "Aurora X on approach. 3 miles out. Copy that, Captain Carter. Wind 210 at 5. Cleared to land. Runway 27. Welcome home. Welcome home." He almost smiled at the phrase. The words didn't mean geography anymore. They meant alignment, between who he was and who he'd fought to become. The wheels kissed the runway with a whisper. No bounce, no drift. Just perfect contact. So smooth the applause from the control tower came a half-second late, as if the ground itself had taken a breath before clapping. Inside the cockpit, Noah powered down the systems. The hum of the engines faded to a hush. Silence returned, not empty but earned. He sat there for a long moment, watching the sunlight slide across the glass. Then he unbuckled, stood, and turned toward the open cabin door. Evelyn was waiting at the foot of the stairs when he emerged. No cameras now, no spectators, just the two of them and the whisper of cooling metal. She looked up as he descended. "Textbook landing," she said softly. He shrugged. "I had good instructors. You were the instructor," he smiled. Then I finally listened to myself. They stood there in the golden silence, the jet behind them gleaming like a promise fulfilled. Evelyn's eyes flicked toward the hangar, where banners now hung beside the Institute's crest, photos of the first graduating class. "The new recruits, the mentors who had once been invisible, they're all inside," she said, "waiting to hear from you." He glanced toward the open doors. "They don't need to hear from me. They need to hear themselves. But you started this." I just reminded them they could start, too. For a moment, the breeze off the tarmac tangled her hair, and he saw her differently, not as the woman who once wielded power like a weapon, but as someone who had learned the weight of it. "You know," she said, "when you first walked into my hangar 5 years ago, I didn't even notice you," he chuckled, low and genuine. "You weren't supposed to." "I see you now." "I know," he said. That's what matters. They walked together toward the hangar. The students had gathered near the stage, the same platform where Noah had given his first speech as director. Their faces shone, excitement, disbelief, pride. When he stepped up, the murmurs quieted. He looked out over them, pilots, engineers, mechanics, dreamers, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel the urge to perform. "Every flight has 2 truths," he began. "The lift that takes you up, and the gravity that brings you home." He let the pause breathe. Today wasn't about me flying again. It was about proving the sky belongs to everyone willing to reach for it. You, us, the ones they never expected. Soft applause rippled, building slowly, growing louder, filling the hangar until the walls vibrated. Evelyn watched from the edge of the stage. For all her speeches, all her boardrooms, she had never seen words land like this. Quiet, simple, true. When it subsided, Noah added, "Tomorrow, I won't be in this cockpit. One of you will, and when you lift off, remember you don't carry my story. You carry your own." He stepped back. The applause came again, longer this time. Not thunderous, but steady, like heartbeat against sky. Evelyn's voice, barely audible above it, said, "You've changed everything, Noah." He looked at her, then at the students. "No," he said. "We did." Outside, the sunset bled into twilight. The day was ending, but the horizon, it was still wide open. Night folded itself over the city like silk. The hum of engines, the glow of hangars, the faint shimmer of heat above the runway, all of it fading into stillness. Noah walked alone toward the outer gate, flight bag slung over one shoulder. Every step felt both heavier and lighter, as if each footfall released a fragment of the past. Behind him, the hangar lights dimmed one by one. The McCall Institute had gone quiet, but the echoes remained. Laughter, engines, applause. The sound of something beginning. He reached the fence line and stopped. Beyond it, the ocean stretched dark and endless, merging with the horizon. Miami glittered in the distance, a scatter of constellations pretending to be a city. For the first time in years, he didn't feel the need to go higher. The air smelled faintly of salt and jet fuel, two scents that had always defined his life. He inhaled deeply, then exhaled through a quiet smile. Somewhere above, a private jet crossed the sky, its lights blinking against the black. He followed it with his eyes until it vanished into cloud. He thought about everything that had brought him here, the insult that sparked defiance, the storm that tested it, the silence that followed. The years of scrubbing metal, of dreaming in secret, of carrying grief like a second heartbeat. He had been invisible once, then misunderstood. Now, finally, just seen. A soft voice broke his reverie. "You didn't say goodbye." Evelyn stood a few paces behind him, coat draped over her arm. The night wind caught her hair, framing her face in motion and shadow. "I'm not good at endings," he said. "Then make this one a beginning." He turned slightly, catching the faint reflection of runway lights in her eyes. "You're not leaving tonight, are you?" She shook her head. "Too much paperwork. Too many ghosts to chase. Let them rest," he said. "The sky's already forgiven us." She studied him, the quiet, the peace, the man who had finally landed. "What will you do now?" He looked back at the horizon. "Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. There's a boy in Detroit who sent me a letter. Says he's fixing old Cessnas in his uncle's garage. Thinks flying's only for people with money. Maybe I'll show him otherwise." Her smile was small but real. "You're building an army of dreamers." Someone has to. The wind shifted. A plane lifted in the distance, its sound deep and resonant, a heartbeat made of thunder. Both of them turned to watch it rise. Evelyn spoke softly, almost to herself. "Do you ever miss it? The danger, the chaos, the unknown?" He considered. "Every day." Then after a pause, "But peace is harder, and I think I've earned the right to try it." She nodded slowly, understanding what he didn't say. When she left, he stayed where he was, eyes tracing the path of the departing plane until the sky swallowed it. He thought of Rocket, of Marcus and Zara, of every name carved into the quiet spaces of his life. He imagined them somewhere beyond the clouds, waiting. Then he said, barely above a whisper, "See you up there." The wind carried it away. Noah turned toward the city, the runway lights fading behind him. His shadow stretched long across the pavement, one man walking away from the past but not from flight. As he reached the gate, he glanced once more at the sky, vast, open, infinite, and the faintest hint of dawn bleeding into the edge of night. He smiled, because endings, he realized, were just takeoffs in disguise, and somewhere above the dark horizon, the world kept flying, static. Then a voice, calm, familiar. "Aurora Tower, this is Captain Carter. Transmitting final log." The radio crackled softly. Its signal carried on late-night frequencies only a few still listened to. Outside, the world was asleep. But somewhere, above the slow spin of the earth, his words still moved, crossing oceans, skipping across stars. It's strange, isn't it? The sky doesn't keep secrets. It just waits. Cut to a montage of silent images, classrooms glowing under fluorescent light, students laughing over flight manuals, mechanics in jumpsuits leaning over open engines, their faces streaked with oil and purpose. A banner across one hangar reads, "The sky belongs to everyone." A voice, Evelyn's, overlays, measured and reflective. He never wanted monuments, just a fair sky. That's what he built. And what he left behind. Fade to the McCall Institute courtyard. The new recruits gather beneath a rising dawn. Their uniforms shimmer in pale gold. One of them, a young boy from Detroit, carries a small charm shaped like a wing. He looks up, squinting against the sunlight, as a training jet climbs overhead. "When we started," Noah's voice continues. We wanted to fly. Then we learned why. A low hum builds beneath the narration. The sound of turbines spinning, memory breathing. Because up there, you can't lie to yourself. The air thins, the noise drops, and all that's left is who you are. Cut to Evelyn, years later, sitting in her office overlooking the bay. The skyline glows silver in the morning light. On her desk sits a framed photo. Noah standing beside the Aurora X, smiling faintly at something beyond the camera. She traces the edge of the glass, then closes her eyes. If the sky forgave him, she whispers, maybe we can forgive ourselves. Outside her window, 3 training aircraft rise in formation, their contrails weaving across the sky like threads of light. The music swells, not triumphant, but reverent, cut to Noah's old hangar, now a museum. The plaque beneath the restored Aurora X reads, Captain Noah Carter, who reminded the world that flight begins with faith. Visitors move slowly through the exhibit. Among them, an elderly woman wipes her eyes. A young girl presses her palms against the glass, whispering, someday. The camera pans upward. The hangar roof slides open to reveal the sky, vast, blue, unclaimed. If the sky belongs to everyone, Noah's final words echo, then maybe someday we'll learn to share the ground. Silence, only wind. Then, faintly, a radio ping. One last signal, one last heartbeat. Aurora Tower. Captain Carter signing off. Fade to black. A pause long enough to feel. Then, across the screen, the sky belongs to everyone, inspired by true strength. The hum of engines rises once more, soft, eternal, fading into the sound of wind. Noah Carter didn't just fly a jet. He flew through judgment, silence, and every chain meant to keep him grounded. And somewhere between takeoff and landing, he reminded the world that flight doesn't begin with engines. It begins with belief. If his story moved you tonight, don't just watch. Remember. Remember the ones who are still waiting for someone to see them, because the sky belongs to everyone. But not everyone gets the chance to reach it. Subscribe to Black Voices Justice for more stories of resilience, power, and truth. Until next time, look up. The next voice that breaks the silence might be yours.